James was a big influence, of his style and his approach with his lyrics and everything. So even to this day, I even say it in magazines, I would like, when I write, sometimes I'm like, what would James do in this part, I kind of throw that in there in my head. And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe he'd kind of just croon over this a little bit. So, I kind of, I take that approach still to this day, what would James do?
The David Ellefson Show. Featuring Grammy Award winner David Ellefson and respected metal journalist Joshua Toomey. Presented by EllisonEmporium.com. Here's David and Joshua.
Well, hey, welcome to the show. David Ellefson here, Josh Toomey. And
we doing Chuck?
Today joining us, Chuck Billy.
So, all right.
Dude, thanks for dropping in, man. You and I haven't chatted in a minute, and it's funny, I was chatting with Alex Skolnick on some Metal Allegiance stuff, and I knew you guys were down in South America, and I didn't even know if you're going to be home by now, to be honest with you, so I didn't know.
We just got home. I think it was yesterday morning or something. We hit the ground running, yeah.
So were you headlining down there, or was it a festival?
Yeah, we did. No, headline, we did 11 shows. In like 21 days. It was real comfortable flying every other day, so it wasn't so bad. Yeah. And played 7 shows in Brazil alone, and the rest all over. So it was a good trip.
That's the right way to do it.
Can't beat those South American metal fans, man. They are a wild bunch. Anytime I see videos, I'm like, why does a band play anywhere but South America?
Yeah, just like I'm sure you've been at Dave in Chile or anything like that when they start breaking out the flares, or Bogota, Colombia, so you always have a little of that.
I remember we got lucky to go to Rock in Rio 91, and that was our first, tipping our toe in the water. Of course, that was huge, but, it's a big festival. And then we went back in 94 and kicked off our Euthanasia album campaign, and that's when we really got to feel that impact, like, okay, these are our fans, this is for real. And look, you and me playing metal, especially thrash metal, as soon as the dictator falls, as soon as all that gets swept out, they immediately call us, right? It's like, let's get the metal bands down here, So
well, the Metal Allegiance, when he did that show there, that was off the hook, it was great.
Yeah, I know. I was bummed I wasn't able to be part of that. And it's funny because that was when you guys were doing basically the Bay Area Strikes Back tour, right? Weren't you guys kind of all?
Yeah, but not on that. That was just the Bay Area. I mean, just the Metal Allegiance at the Rock in Rio.
Yeah. But I remember you guys were doing. So wait, let's go back to that real quick because you guys were doing that tour during COVID, I think, right? Wasn't that?
Yeah.
You guys, and you. Couple of you guys got sick, I think, right?
Yeah, right up before the record came out. We, the release date, COVID hit, around March 18th to 20th, somewhere around there. So, of course, everybody went home. Few people got sick. Will and Death Angel got the sickest. He was hospitalized for a while. And, it wasn't fun. And, we all didn't know that we were all going to be trapped for a few years at home and make the best of it, but, and it's been a while that kind of held us up and, took some time till we wrote this new record finally, without anything seriously happening in the world, I guess, Yeah.
So, that's why I wanted to have you on here other than just to say hello because we haven't seen each other in a minute. And I don't know if you're going to be, your plans will allow to do some Metal Allegiance stuff in January, as we always do that. But
I committed a few weeks ago. So
all right, good. I know Umenki circles the email. It's like, all right, are you in? And it's like, we're in. And most of the time we don't even know for sure exactly what we're doing. I mean, I guess we kind of know. We
know
6 months to a year out. Yeah. So no, it's good. Well, that's great. I look forward to throwing down with you there. But I mean, look, so 5 years since you've had an album, so the new album, Para Bellum, Nuclear Blast, comes out August 10th.
October 10th.
I'm sorry, October 10th. My bad. Sorry, my bad. Yeah. I'm looking right at it and I'd say not the right word. But so the video, Infanticide? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Infanticide A.I.
Infanticide A.I. So was it
Yeah.
an AI video?
No, not at all. It was supposed to be, that feeling of it and the live feeling with where we were. It was a really cool place. We went down Southern California and
Mhm.
shot it. But the basically the storyline is just AI taking over technology, trying to shut down the next generation rising, new generation born. In that video at the end, after all of it, you think you control it, and then the next baby opens its eyes, and it's like Terminator.
I
Oh,
love that. Yeah.
didn't make it. It got through. We didn't suppress it, so yeah. But it's a good, fast, hard, long track that rips pretty good.
Dude, it was a great video too. I mean, as soon as I saw it, I was like, wow. Obviously we've made a lot of videos over the years, but that one I thought for you guys was like a really, I mean, the sound's great, of course, but there was sort of a, not, I don't want to say grown up, but just a sort of a current of age kind of maturity about it that was badass looking. Everybody looks great. The quality of the video is great. We've made a lot of videos in cages and old school thrash videos over the years. You know what I mean? So it's kind of nice when I guess you get to a point where it's almost cinematic looking. I thought the quality of it was super great.
He did a great job. And I think, originally we were like, we don't really want a big performance video. We want it to be more about the story and the AI and just the imagery we're trying to, portray in the lyrics without putting the lyric video together.
Yeah.
And he did a good blend of both. He did a really good job. We're following up now with like just a visual song of Shadow People coming out here, I believe now in another week or so. And yeah, the Nuclear Blast hit you up with the whole record.
I got the whole record. Yep. So
Right on.
Josh and I have been checking it out. So yeah, super great, man.
It's a little bit of everything on there, for sure. It's not, you can't label just a thrash record. It's got a lot of fast stuff, groovy stuff, heavy stuff, rock stuff. It's got a little of everything,
Yeah.
I was going to talk about the the AI aspect of the first single, and then the one thing about the the cover of the record is actually painted rather than just an AI generated album cover, which is kind of taking over these days. And it's funny how many times I'll watch a video, and even like David's new Ellefson Show video and things like that. People are like saying thank you for not putting out an AI video. So I mean, it's funny how much AI is taking over, and it's awesome how you guys still used a painter to paint the album cover.
Well, I mean, it's to everybody's preference or choice. Also, that's probably pretty cheap to get an AI one done compared to paying somebody to create it. So yeah, but you're never going to capture that creativity of an artist, and especially if they capture what you're, thinking. So yeah.
Well, plus it requires everybody being in the room together. You know what I mean? Which, if you live near each other, as I assume you guys do still for the most part.
Not much, but we let Eric control that, because too many cooks in the kitchen, it just gets too out of hand. So Eric's got a good grip on artwork and t-shirt designs and that stuff. So we let him run with it until it's time to let's see the pencil sketch. And then once we get to there, it's like, okay, move on. And then it's just comes alive, so he's got a really good eye for that.
So the one thing I noticed on the album too, sorry, David, the one thing I noticed in the album too, Chuck, is your voice, you're consistently, your voice has been consistent over the entire career. There's not a drop off. It might have even gotten better over the years. You know what I'm saying? Like, so what is it about the voice, man, that you've got? Because I mean, a lot of the guys that are aging, got it, some can't sing anymore, some can. And, you seem to be just plowing through and getting better with age.
Well, I think it just comes with playing together as a band as long as we have, just knowing how to work with each other, what works with each other, so it, I wouldn't say it gets easier, but we know what the other guy's thinking. So we do the best we can with the tools we have with the way we write, and I think Eric just keeps surprising me and coming up with these different riffs and new, especially with Chris in the band. He's 27, so I think he brings a newer generation style of music that he listens to because he's much younger than us. So with him and Eric working together, and Eric's really kind of the orchestra leader when it comes to like drums and punches and timing with his riffing. It's a great combination with Chris and Eric. And you can tell on the record that either Chris pushed Eric or Eric pushed Chris. You can't tell, but they're both working really good together, and they came up with some good stuff. And sounds to me, I mean, it just makes it feel fresh. I'd say that's what it, to me, it feels, you know.
Yeah, for sure. You know what? And even in the video, I mean, obviously he's just crushing it, and you know, it's great when in a video because you can put the visual with it, you know. But
Right.
where did you find him? Where did you find Chris?
It's funny because when Lombardo couldn't do the new record, we knew, okay, well, we're probably gonna have to get a drummer replacement. Or no, this was actually before. I'm sorry, when Gene left, and we are going to look for a drummer. We were taking videos from people, and we really enjoyed Chris's playing. And then at the 24th hour, Lombardo calls me and says, "Hey, man, I hear you're looking for a drummer." And of course, we're like, "You're in." You know, I mean, that's kind of the way that went. And so we kind of put Chris on the back burner, and Dave couldn't make, like, I think the first 5 shows of a tour. So we said, let's call that Chris up and have him fill in. Right. And he came out to the first rehearsal, and in the video, unfortunately, we couldn't see his face. We didn't really forgot to question how old he was. So he shows up and we're like, how old are you? He's like 24. And that was at this time, like, holy shit, you know, 24-year-old. But he's a really mature guy and like old soul. And he just loves like old rock too and stuff. And it was just a really good vibe. And he sat down and honestly, he knew more songs than we knew. You know, he was ready to perform more than we were ready to do. You know, that's how ready he was. And from that point on, once we knew Dave couldn't do the record, right away we called Chris, and Chris filled in, did some tours, and then started working with Eric immediately, writing. And that's when it just kind of, you know, they just steamrolled it.
So he truly is the new guy. I mean, I think about, you know, you guys have had Bo Staff and Gene Hoglan and, you know, Lombardo. Like, these are our buddies, right? We've all grown up around each other. So it's kind of like having a friend in the band, right? And you kind of already are familiar with their playing. We've toured together, you know, in other bands. Obviously, everybody's, you know, you're those drummers in other bands and stuff. So you get some young buck in there. And is there this sort of paternal sense, like, you know, how to raise a young man right in a rock and roll band kind of thing?
Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, you know, I mean, you hate to say that, but yeah, I mean, you know, because if anything I've learned, you know, over the 40 years of touring, if anything I can share with him to help him along his path, because, you know, he's just starting his path, you know, really. And like I said, he's an old soul. He fits well. And we kid around about that. It's like, you know, 10 more years, kid, you know, you'll be on your way, you know.
Yeah, you're just in the trenches. Earning your stripes.
When you've got somebody that young in the band, do you allow them to kind of make the mistakes of early touring and maybe staying up too late, drinking all the nonsense? Or are you like trying to give them like give them wisdom the entire time and being like, hey, don't do that.
It works both ways, you know, but you know, a band touring for 40 years, you have certain ways that you do things. Like, you know, just one little example, our bus is our home and we like to keep it private, you know, so we don't let many people on there. And, you know, and that was probably the first experience with them. You know, a lot of people are like, okay, this is kind of off space. So that was just one example. But, you know, if anything, we can teach him. But like I said, he's one of us, you know. He jokes around with Di Giorgio and Eric, and it's a really good fit, you know. He doesn't act his age for sure.
That's good. Yeah.
And he can play like a motherfucker.
Hey, yeah, so man, tons of blast beats on the record, you know, obviously almost a little bit of like you know, black metal influence for Eric there, you know, kind of just coming out of him, man. So it's great.
Eric's in heaven when it comes to that part of writing with the other part of groovy part of it, you know. So And for Eric, when he goes, "Hey, Chris, can you do this?" And Chris goes, "Oh yeah." It's like Eric's like in heaven going, "Right on," Yes, more of that. Okay, so now let's write it's working really well with Eric.
So, it's funny, like what Josh was saying. Every time I hear a New Testament record, I'm like, what the fuck with these guys, man? It's like it gets harder, faster, younger sounding, like just pushing it to the limit. Whereas, a lot of us, and I would include myself, our Megadeth trajectory through the '90s, it was radio rock time. Stay in the game, right? You guys didn't play that game, and it's funny because you guys and Slayer in particular. Whereas probably us, Metallica, Anthrax, of course, with John Bush, kind of opened up a new,
Right.
sound for them a little bit, and then so play the MTV, play the radio game. You guys didn't do that, but it's funny in the long game. You guys actually are coming out on top. You know what I mean? Where Slayer was able to retire.
Well, like a record like this, if you heard "Meant to Be," we haven't done a ballad like that on a record in 30 plus years. On this record.
Right.
And we put an orchestra in the background. We never put strings in there, work with stuff like that. So it's a whole different thing. We're just like, you know what? It sounds good. It feels good. Eric and Alex worked on it a long time. Eric was actually going to New York to Alex's place for the first time in a writing session and was actually working with him. And they wouldn't tell me or play me the song. They just said, I'm like, well, what was going on in New York? And then he's like, oh, me and Alec were working on this thing. It's going to be epic. And that's all he'd say. And I'd say, okay, well, that's pretty strong words. So I had to wait until they actually put it together but in the end, it was actually Alex had it written it one way and Eric had written it another. But somehow, first time ever, they got together and actually made it work together, both of their ideas. And, again, I was like, wow, you guys did it. The way you guys, just Eric and Alex team, the way they write and work is just awesome.
So let me ask you this, though, because it's funny, for Megadeth, we always seem to be on an off cycle from Metallica, right? So they had an album out, we were in the studio. We were on the road, they were in the studio, right? So there's always this off thing. But, I mean, let's call it what it is. The late 80s, really, even into probably the mid 90s, Metallica led the charge, and thank God, because they kicked down some very big doors that allowed all the rest of us to come through, right? But, as they turned, so did the world, you know what I mean? Things followed them. And, so how much of an influence, look, just them, also being Bay Area guys, and at some point this whole Bay Area legacy, because I had people even go, oh, let's go play the Bay Area. It's like, dude, the Stone ain't there. Like that whole thing that you heard about the Bay Area, like that's not there anymore. There's not like there's a monument to Ruthie's or like that's all. LA still has the whiskey. You know what I mean? So there's at least some remnant of the Sunset Strip and the Rainbow, the whiskey, the Roxy. There's still a little monument to it that's still active as well.
Right.
But, the Bay Area, that's all gone. But for you guys, how much of an influence, or did it sort of, help chart a course for Testament at all, or was that really not even
well, of course,
for you guys?
well, of course, when it started, we were just starting, so right place, right time, growing up with it. But for me personally, me as a vocalist, songwriter, trying to write thrash music, coming from more of a rock background when I started singing, James was a big influence, of his style and his approach with his lyrics and everything. So even to this day, I even say it in magazines, I would like, when I write, sometimes I'm like, what would James do in this part, I kind of throw that in there in my head. And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe he'd kind of just croon over this a little bit. So, I kind of, I take that approach still to this day, what would James do? But it helps me then when I write, and I approach every song with the way Eric gives me. Each song is different vibe, If it's fast, I know where to go. If it's slower, I got to find my way and find a melody. And the real clean, pretty stuff, I really got to find it,
Yeah.
But it came together on this record.
WWJD. What would James do?
That's
When we had Metal Maria on, it kind of just popped back in my head. We had Metal Maria on. She talked about when Cliff passed, Jonny was with you guys, right? Like he was out there, kind of scouting you guys out, kind of, bringing you on to Megaforce. What do you kind of remember about that, and kind of them hearing the news as you guys heard the news?
Well, it was a solemn tryout audition because it was the night before. Jonny and Marcia flew in the night before, and they got word in the middle of the night what happened. And then so they were up all night, but the next day was when we were supposed to do our audition, play live for them in the studio. And they came, and we heard the news, and it was just like, it was quiet and somber, but we played, and just as simple as that, Jonny goes, okay, sounds great. We got a deal. And they had to go do what they needed to go do. And that was kind of it. And, and then we all mourned what was going on and shocked, and took, a few months. And then finally, we worked it out with them and signed to Megaforce.
Wow. Now, it's interesting going from, because, you guys being Megaforce OGs, and then making the jump to Atlantic Records. When did you do that? Was that when we did because I want to go back and talk about when we did the Painkiller.
Well, it was like the New Order. I mean, we had Warner distributed in Europe, and then Atlantic kind of took a deal with Jonny and took a few bands, like us, Overkill, a few other King's X maybe and stuff, and were distributed. And I think by maybe the third record, had the Atlantic label on it, straight Atlantic, all the way through those 6 records.
Hey, so what are some memories? Let's go back to the Judas Priest, Painkiller, Megadeth, Rest in Peace, Testament. That was Souls of Black, I think, right?
Yeah.
Right on that tour. So, huge for us, right? I mean, for guys like you and me, we're out with the mighty Judas Priest. This is it. We're turning the corner. We're on MTV now, right? We can feel it, right? It's our turn to bat, right? It's coming, right?
Yeah.
And kind of 3 generations, you guys representing the newest of thrash metal, Megadeth being, a bit established, and of course Judas Priest, fucking Led Zeppelin, basically at that point, right? So, at least for metal, right? So, what are some memories that you have from that tour?
Well, I remember we just had flew in from doing big tour over in Europe, and I guess the biggest memory is the band you played in. No offense, Dave, but the other Dave, I don't know if you remember that tour. Because things were growing for us, we had ordered a brand new Volker drum riser built on a riser. All these cabinets showed up, backdrops. And I don't know if you remember, Dave pulled them from us all on the start of that tour. He's seen it, and he said we couldn't use all of that. So we couldn't use our riser backdrops and stuff. And my band nudged me on, because every day KK or Tipton would come in and say, hey, you guys good? You guys need anything? And they'd be elbowing me, dude, say something. I'm like, no. And then one day I was like, dude, go talk to Rob, please. So I went in there and I told Rob what was going on. And that day he's like, what? This is ending today. And he went into production and said, Testament gets everything up there, get their drums up there, get their backdrops, get everything up there. And when we went on that night, I know Dave was side stage by the monitors, not you, Dave, the other Dave.
Yeah.
And his arms were crossed, and he was just having a fit that we were having everything again. and it was crazy, but it was just that was the biggest start of that tour for us, because things were starting to happen, and we're like, oh man, we just bought this big show to play for Judas Priest and Megadeth, man. And we want to, and in the end, we got to use it, and it ended up being great, and it was amazing. And that was probably the highlight, opening up for myself. I played Judas Priest songs on guitar all through high school. They're my biggest heroes ever. And for that tour, it was just like a dream come true for me, So that was probably the big thing, for that.
I don't remember that exactly, but again, as people bring these stories up, they sound faintly familiar, right? So, and of course, I believe you. And it does sound about right. But it's funny, right? They're using what? No way. But God bless Rob Halford. He is
Yep.
the metal god. So it's interesting. You talk about the Volker drum rack. So for the viewers, that was the same rack Nick Menza had.
Yeah,
There's a guy named
exactly.
Greg Volker. He made these incredible drum racks. In fact, we first saw it. I remember when Whitesnake played on the MTV Awards when they had the big records, Still the Night. Tommy Aldridge had one of those big racks like that, and that was the first time that I remember seeing one. And then Nick had his made, and obviously
Louis had one made and had one
Louis had
sent
one
in.
made. And it's funny, it's funny that would even be an issue, because that tour was the first time we started using set carts with the scrims. Like, we had basically the Rust in Peace album
Right.
cover as a backdrop, and then we had the scrims, which are like a soft,
Right.
cloth, basically it's stretched over to the set carts, and the amps were behind it. So that was the first time that we went into that world, which was kind of more Iron Maiden-esque, like on, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son and these kind of things, where they didn't, you hadn't seen Iron Maiden, and you hadn't seen amps on an Iron Maiden stage in years, right? So we, I think, kind of went in more into that world because it had this 3-dimensional look. So I'm surprised that was even an issue, how many Marshalls you stacked up, because that just wasn't what we were doing anymore, right? We had moved away.
Right.
So, and that's funny. So you talk about the big tour before the tour, which is the same one we were on, called Clash of the Titans.
Clash of the Titans.
It was Clash of the Titans, the first version of it that we did. It was Slayer, Megadeth, Testament, Suicidal Tendencies. And we didn't rotate. Slayer always closed. I mean, that was always a big thing for us, was it was a co-headliner, as far as Megadeth and Slayer, but Slayer always closed. And I remember our manager, Ron the Feet, talking to Dave, like, of course, Dave wanted to close, and it's like, nah, you don't want to go after Slayer. Plus, when you play before Slayer, you get Testament's fans, you get Suicidal, Testament, our fans, and the Slayer fans, and if you play after, Slayer fans love Slayer, but they also like everybody else, and so I don't know. I always felt like probably where Testament and Megadeth were on that bill were the best spots, right? Because
that was our first taste of that size of a tour. Those were some big rooms, sold out everywhere. So, that was our first taste. Like, wow, look at these, just a lot of people here from the start of the first band to the end, just packed.
Yeah.
And, that was an awesome tour. And remember, it was sponsored by Jägermeister. That's where the trouble started, I think, on that tour.
It's funny. I remember. I think Lars came to the Danish show, right? The Copenhagen show, because I seem to remember Dave and him talking. I think he went out back and played tennis. We were basically playing in like a tennis arena, right? There were like tennis courts around the back or something. So that was the first time I ever had Jägermeister on the Injustice for All tour. Lars had some of that, and he goes, "Here, have some of this." I was like, and I drink it. I'm like, the fuck is it? It tastes like cold, like NyQuil. It's like coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
Who knew he was on the cutting edge?
Chilled NyQuil.
We had one tour that was sponsored by Jägermeister, and for some reason the fans thought that you must love Jägermeister, so you would always be handed Jägermeister shots, or you go out in the crowd and people would just walk up with Jägermeister shots, and Jäger, man, that'll sneak up on you. The next thing you know, you're ready to fight everybody.
Oh man, yeah, we had some of those nights. We found the stash of the tour as well. The first introduction.
That was our first sober tour, actually. That was the Megadeth sober tour. The calls were made ahead by the travel agent, make sure all of the mini bars are empty. The band is, and Ron the Feet, he mentored under Tim Collins, who managed Aerosmith, and Aerosmith were one of the sober heroes of that day, so he kind of learned, okay, well, how do we do this, right? So there's kind of a model, of the sober this is before sober companions and all this kind of stuff, where sober people would get hired to travel with the band, and we didn't have that kind of money to do that kind of shit back then anyway. But because we were just rebuilding, but yeah, it was the sober tour. And I remember checking into the hotel in Amsterdam, and I look out my window and there's guys smoking heroin right out my window. I'm like, where were you guys 3 years ago when we needed this? Now you're
Right out my
cleaning, it's
window.
everywhere. Yeah, right out your window. Now that I'm trying not to do that, there it is. But
yeah.
no, that was yeah. It's funny, a newly sober, band like us on a newly sober tour like that. And look, you guys can party and everybody can do whatever they want, and we were the ones not doing that, right? We were the ones keeping our nose clean.
Well, you were talking earlier about, Dave kind of messing with you with the stage stuff. And then obviously years later, Dave comes and asks for Steve Di Giorgio to come play on a Megadeth record. What was kind of your take, him kind of almost poaching your bass player at the time?
Well, I mean, I wish the best for Steve. We never nudged him, but Steve did his due diligence and asked people that knew Dave and people that have been around Dave, and just kind of did his thing. And when it came time for him to have an offer, I mean, he's been with us for a long time. Kind of, it's real close family. And, honestly, I think Steve probably wouldn't have lasted, because I know Steve very well. I don't think I just don't think it would have lasted.
Yeah.
Just the sandals alone and the Birkenstocks, I think probably wouldn't have lasted very long.
Fucking out, yeah.
But things happen for a reason. He made a great record. He did what he needed to do. He was called to the plate. He had time. Stepped in right into our record. Did a killer job, and we're just doing our thing. And I'm good for him. He did a good job. And why not? Steve's an amazing bass player.
Oh yeah. Precious.
Yeah, he's really good. In fact, yeah, we had him on the podcast, as you may know, and we were talking about his other band too, with the two bass players, which is super great. And and it's funny, you were kind enough to let Dieth come out when we debuted our album back in 2023. We did a couple shows with you guys, and I Steve pulled me aside into the production office and said, "Hey, come here, I want to have a chat." And he got ahead of it, and I wasn't even thinking about it. I mean, to me, it was so far in my rearview mirror, but he just said, "Hey, man, I just wanted to talk with you about it. And so there's nothing weird out here that, I played on that Megadeth record." I said, "Man, it's all good." It was very professional of him to do that. And he certainly earned a big stock, as if he needed it. He didn't with me. We were cool anyway, but I thought that was very bro-like of him, to do that.
That's who he is. He's, he's, at one way he's flattered and he's awesome to be chose to do it. And then on the other hand, he's a bro hanging tight with his bros, still making records with us and being who he wants to be.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, with Greg Christian, and not to bring up anything from the past, but it's funny, I was just up in San Francisco up with Tommy at EMG, and we were just, as we're driving through from the airport to Santa Rosa and back and forth, I just get all these memories, and his name came up. I God, I haven't talked to Greg in a while, and because I remember when I was working for Petey, I remember seeing you guys. I was just in Austin, Texas, and we drove past Stubbs. And I remember, I think when we played at Stubbs, were you guys on that tour with us?
I don't think we played Stubbs. I'm not sure.
You guys are, or maybe you guys were. It was a different thing. Maybe when I worked at PB or something. Anyway, there's just all these sudden memories about Greg, and who I got on with real well, and was an OG with the band. So there's all this history, and
Greg's still family to us, and Greg's going to be Greg, but he's still a part of the history,
Oh, yeah, that's cool. That's good.
Dave, did you want to hit that thing? Hit that thing with the when you first got back to Megadeth and hanging out with Chuck.
Oh yeah, I was just thinking. We're talking about Clash of the Titans and Judas Priest back in 1990. So 2010, I go back to Megadeth, and you and we had some good bro times, a good hang time on that tour. I remember you were talking how you're a cancer survivor. You had just gone through that, and I think those things. I had been through my own sobriety, kind of spiritual awakenings, and I think we're just kind of men of that age, right? Sort of like as we turned the corner from the old days to, where we are today, going through some life challenges and being on the other side of it. And there we were back on tour again, playing arenas together. I think it was Slayer, Megadeth, Testament on the Jägermeister tour or something, if I'm not mistaken, right? So,
yeah, what was that called? Not the Metal Masters, or what was called? It was, I forget, had a title.
Is that the
About American Carnage, I think, wasn't
American
it?
Carnage, yeah.
That was awesome, And it's funny how you just see the fans evolve over the years, just younger and younger, but all the old schools are right there with you as well. It's awesome to see that.
It's so interesting you say that, because I remember seeing these young, like teenage kids that you could tell they'd probably bought their Testament, Slayer, and Megadeth T-shirts at Hot Topic, right? Which is where you would buy T-shirts, and they're right in the front row, like going, "Oh my God, there it is!" Like, and I remember being that kid with my friends, going to see AC/DC and Cheap Trick, and my bands growing up, right? And being at the front row, going, "Oh my God, they're going to come out soon," and just seeing that wide-eyed wonder. And then, back by the sound console toward the back of the floor is the decade before them. And then up in the seats, of course, were the OGs like us, right? Because they don't want to get their ass kicked in a mosh pit anymore. But that was, I remember that tour in particular is the first time I really saw that. It was because we were all about 30 years into our career, or 25, 30 years in. And you could see it. It's like, man, about every 10 years, every decade, there's sort of a changeover, of a new era coming in. And I was just thinking how lucky we are to have that, man, that it wasn't just a one-trick pony that got flushed out, and it's something that just kind of regenerates itself. Well,
that was an awesome tour. I remember you celebrating. You broke out the old Rust in Peace set. Remember, you guys brought that old set out. I think Workman might have been working on that tour, and back to the old school OG light guys. And
he was
Slayer.
A great
I remember Testament. Yeah. That was the first tour that we brought big decking out and all this crap. And I remember Kerry King's face on that first time we set up our shit. The first day of the tour, we're like, "Oh shit, here it goes." First thing Kerry comes, he's just like, "On what the fuck," because back then I think Kerry was still just doing the cabinets, and I think before the end of that tour, he had fire, he had all kinds of shit going on by the end of that trip.
You got him to step up his game. So with Judas Priest, it was Dave who was pissed, and then about 20 years later, Kerry's pissed. What the fuck?
Kerry was on it. Yeah. So it's funny, evolving. Yeah, it was awesome.
No, you're right. It's funny. You're right. I remember you broke that out, and I remember thinking, like, geez, it was like the seventh son of a seventh son. It was like this big,
massive wings and stairs and the whole deal.
How are they going to get all that shit on stage every night? You know what I mean? But
we did. We were off. Guys were like, we're off in 39 seconds. We're like, good. We're like, good job, guys. All on wheels.
It's super great, man. It's super great. Well, look, good. Best luck. Para Bellum, October 10th, album comes out. So good luck on that. Be safe on tour. And I look forward to throwing down some Metal Allegiance with you in January. And thanks for taking some time to come on the show and talk about everything. So
I'll see you at rehearsals down in LA in January.
See you there, man. See you there.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chuck.
Bye.